If I have to record this video one more time. Hi, it's Evelyn. This is the 8th time I've tried to record this video and the 4th time that I've put on makeup for this. So I apologize in advance for however shitty this next few minutes are going to be, but this is it. None of us know how we're in December of 2020. The end of the year has always been a tough time for me, and this year in particular for obvious reasons, and I get the feeling that I might not be alone. So I hope you're taking care. In the spirit of a year that we all cannot wait to be over, I thought I'd talk about some uplifting and empowering books that helped me get through some tough times this year. We're gonna talk about 9 books today. Some of them I have physical copies of, some of them I don't, and I have broken them down into different categories. You can feel free to find the timestamps in the description. I wanted to start with 2 books that, in my opinion, are about the main characters' journeys to find themselves, Educated and The Namesake. I feel like this year, since we've all had a lot of time in quarantine, all of us have had some sort of identity crisis or quarter life crisis or existential crisis or whatever you call it. Reading Educated and Namesake helped me kind of feel more anchored to who I am. Educated, I'm sure most of you have either heard of it or have read it. It's a memoir by Tara Westover. Tara Westover grew up in a Mormon family in rural Idaho where her dad is a bipolar survivalist, and so she spent a lot of her childhood preserving food for the doomsday. Her dad doesn't trust the public education system and doesn't allow anyone to go to the hospital, so she has never been to the hospital, never had a day of school in her life, and spent her entire childhood secluded and illiterate until when she was 17, she somehow maneuvered her way into Brigham Young University and discovered this whole new world where people take showers regularly and wash their hands after using the bathroom, as one always does with soap. She went on to be a Gates Cambridge scholar and a visiting scholar at Harvard and gave herself an entire new life. The inspiration from this book for most people is the transformative power of education, but the most touching part for me is how, despite Tara Westover's world being so drastically different from her parents, she still loves her family and longs to be connected to them and makes every effort to still be a part of their lives, even though they did end up growing estranged for a slightly different reason. Some of you might know this year I moved back in with my parents in China very unexpectedly, having spent the past 8 years of my life in the US. I spent most of this year being fearful that the identity I have spent the past 8 years to build would be deconstructed. Educated gave me this idea. Perhaps I don't have to give up my own identity in order to be a part of my family, but I was still not sure how. And that's when The Namesake helped me get through that part. The Namesake is the story of an Indian American immigrant, Gogo Ganguly. But hearing this name, you probably know this guy did not have a smooth childhood. This Bengali Indian guy got the last name of a Russian author as his first name because of a mistake at his birth. He pretty much spent his entire life disliking his name, disliking all of the Bengali parties his parents threw to celebrate every single special occasion, disliking his trips back to his parents' homeland, India. So when he went off to college, the first thing he did was that he changed his name, he started dating a white girl, but then a big shock happened in his family that made him suddenly feel the pull to be connected to his roots and finally kind of made peace with his identity and family history. I really struggled giving this synopsis because I didn't want to give too many spoilers. For me, the most touching part of Gogo's story is his path back to his family and his Indian roots started with him taking an interest in his namesake, in his parents' perspective as immigrants. And I started talking to my grandparents about their childhood, which surprisingly, it's something that I never bothered to do before. I was mesmerized by how many stories there are about generations before me that I was completely oblivious of. It makes it so much easier to be more patient with them, be kind to them, and be grateful for everything they've given me. The Namesake is a really difficult book for me to read because I actually started reading it with my then boyfriend, and I had to finish it alone because the boy is not mine anymore. A part of me still thinks that if I just don't talk about it and don't think about it, I can still pretend it didn't happen. But one of the hard things I've learned this year is that time doesn't stop regardless of what happens. Sometimes the best thing and the only thing you can do is to move on. A book that really helped me gain strength and resilience is The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. It's a poetry collection. I don't know how much you know about Instagram poetry, but when I picked up her first poetry collection, Milk and Honey, I honestly felt offended because how can you break up sentences in obscure ways and call it poetry? But I think what Rupi Kaur did really in The Sun and Her Flowers is putting into paragraphs feelings I will never find the vocabulary or syntax or the heart to say out loud, not to mention to put in print for the entire world to judge. This entire poetry collection is her emotional journey, feeling broken after a breakup and then eventually picking herself back up and finding strength in her identity as an immigrant and as a female. Her story really helped me see strength and resilience in myself. But yeah, that's why for those of you who did care enough to notice, I went radio silent for the entire month of September, and then when I came back in October and November, I posted content about happiness and well-being, healthy habits, and that's because those are the only things I focused on for those past few months. For a while I was really proud of myself for just doing so well given the situation, but then the end of November hit and that's when I learned tough times come back in waves. It would come back and catch you off guard just when you least expect it. For the past couple weeks, it started to seem like all the equanimity I've built started to crumble, and it was so hard to get myself up and do things. I was this close to falling into a rut when this book got me back on track. Yes, you have heard 10 other YouTubers, co-workers, and concerned relatives mention it. It is Atomic Habits. I have to give a disclaimer first. I am not a self-help book person, but for the past month, I find myself to actually be leaning on a lot of the takeaways from Atomic Habits. I kind of have 3 favorite ideas from this book. The first one is if you associate your identity with a habit, then it's a lot easier to continue to do it. If working out consistently, for example, is something that's challenging for you, instead of fighting with yourself every single time you try to work out, try telling yourself, I am the kind of person who doesn't miss a workout. That would transform making yourself work out to be simply giving in to who you already are compared to a struggle or negotiation against yourself. My second takeaway from this book is sometimes incremental changes are very difficult to see, but it's important to continue on with your good habits in order for breakthrough to happen with a compounding of time. James Clear gave this really great example of an ice cube in a cold room. When the room is at 25 degrees and you increase it to 26 degrees, nothing would seem to happen to the ice cube. You work a little harder, make the room 27 degrees, 28 degrees, still nothing happens. But once the room reaches 32 degrees, then you see the ice immediately starting to melt. It's all too easy to think the last push from 31 to 32 degrees made all the difference, but the ice cube has really been changing since you started increasing the room temperature at 25 degrees. It's the accumulation of all your efforts, even though it didn't seem to give you a return at the time. My last takeaway from this book is in order to get good at something, the single most important factor is to keep at it. In the book, there's another great example of a photography professor who assigned one group of his students to take as many photos as possible for the entire semester, and then the other group to focus on taking only the best quality photos. At the end of the semester, the highest quality photos are actually all from the group that took as many photos as possible. Those students learned from their mistakes and honed their photography skills. This echoes with the main idea of The World of Art. This is another book that a lot of YouTubers recommended. I give it 2 stars on Goodreads because I personally just didn't like his style of writing, but I can absolutely see another person really liking it and finding it inspirational, so I think it's still worth a mention. The main idea of The World of Art is that if you want to be successful in any pursuit that matters to you, artistic or not, the single most important thing is to show up and do the work every day. But every day we're also in constant battle in our inner resistance that prevents us from doing the work because of a fear of failure. To defeat the inner resistance, you have to show up like a professional every day despite your emotional state and regardless of whether the end result will be successful or not. The next couple books I want to talk about are pure entertainment and inspiration. They're both by Madeline Miller, The Song of Achilles and Circe. They're both retellings of Homeric epics. The Song of Achilles is from the Iliad and Circe is from the Odyssey. Madeline Miller graduated with a degree in classics from Brown University. Fun fact, I actually used to work in Providence, Rhode Island for a year and a half. For a while, I would go to Brown every single night after work, get falafels from East Side Pockets, and then just sneak into the student center to like work and pretend I'm a student. I didn't get caught for quite a few weeks, and then they started requiring like student ID to open the door, and then I just couldn't sneak in anymore. Out of these two books, The Song of Achilles came out first. Madeline Miller spent 8 years or 10 years writing it while she was teaching classics in high school. It's the story of Achilles and Patroclus, told from Patroclus's perspective. We all know of Achilles' story being a grand Greek hero and he's heals and all of that. Patroclus is lesser known. He is Achilles' beloved companion in many official accounts, but there's always been a suspicion that they're actually lovers, and their love story is the main plot of this book. We follow Achilles and Patroclus from when they were both teenage boys all the way to the Trojan War, and witness all the cruelty of battle. This book is very highly rated on Goodreads. It's one of my favorite books of this year, but it really took me quite a while to get the hype. For the first 70% of this book, I was kind of just cringing really hard. On the book cover, it literally says sexy, dangerous, mystical, and I thought a lot of the earlier parts of the book were really cliche and kind of gives off 50 Shades of Grey type of vibe, because here is Achilles, this shiny, glorious Greek warrior who's quite literally half god, and here is Patroclus, who is completely normal looking, clumsy, and has no particular skills. Looks a lot like Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele to me. But towards the end of the book is when it starts to get good. At that point, you really feel connected to the characters and you witness the complexity of the characters starting to grow and you struggle with them. Because I haven't read the Iliad, the ending was a big plot twist for me. If you've read the Iliad, then it won't be as epically shocking for you, I'm sorry. But this book just left me in an emotionally heightened state for quite a few days. Highly recommend this book. It would be a hard one to put down. Circe came out fairly recently, I think in 2018. Oh, fun fact, my favorite restaurant in Providence is called Circe. I don't know whether it has anything to do with this book or not, but I do see the resemblance between Circe in Greek mythology and Circe in the Game of Thrones. In the Odyssey, there's really just one book out of the 24 about Circe. She was one of the obstacles on Odysseus' way back to Ithaca, but in this book, we learn about the entire story of Circe growing up in a very cold and heartless house of gauze. As a kid, she was really close to her brother Aeetes, almost like Cersei and Jaime from Game of Thrones. No one in a world of gauze ever cared about Circe in her entire eternity of existence until they discovered she has witchcraft. As a part of the political bargain between Titans, represented by Helios, Circe's father, and the Olympian gods headed by Zeus, she was banished to the island of Aea, and that's when she crafted her own home, honed her spells and potions, encountered Odysseus, and made him honestly fall in love with her. Unbeknown to Odysseus, she had a child after he left, and the second half of the book was mostly about how Circe goes out of her way and challenges ancient powers, faces unspeakable challenges to protect her child, which we have also seen from the Circe in the Game of Thrones. Unlike most people, I actually liked Circe a lot more than the Song of Achilles because I love the touch of feminism in Circe. It's an incredibly empowering story of a woman with a kind and gentle heart, finding the strength in herself, honing her skills, and choosing to love relentlessly. And lastly, I want to talk about two books that make me want to get out there and change the world. The first is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. This year I've read all 3 of Yuval Noah Harari's books. This one is the most hopeful out of the 3. I fell into a little bit of a depression after reading the other 2, and especially Homo Deus, but I kind of just had to finish the 3rd book in the series and was really surprised to find this book a hopeful one. 21 Lessons for the 21st Century explores 21 topics that are contentious and urgent in our society today. Liberty, immigration, nationalism. I didn't feel too much about, honestly, the first half of the book because I feel like it's more of the same ideas from Sapiens, but I really enjoyed reading the last 4 chapters of the book where he talked about how to handle our post-truth reality where it's very difficult to navigate through contradicting information, how we can use education to navigate the constant change in the world today, what's the meaning of life, and how do we cope with the chaos of it all with meditation. I think Harari's take on free will or the lack thereof, the meaning of life, and meditation is very similar to Sam Harris's viewpoints. If you've seen the last few videos I posted, you probably know I've been consuming a lot of content from Sam Harris and following his guided meditation. So I may be a little bit biased here, but just from an experiential perspective, I have personally benefited a lot from meditation for the past few months. I really appreciate that Harari included meditation as kind of the closing point of his book. The last book I want to talk about, I have to confess, I haven't read it, but I just have to encourage all of you guys to do this, and it is My Own Words by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I discovered this book early 2019 at Powwow's City of Books in Portland, Oregon. I've wanted to read this for a while. Soon after she passed away, I watched the Notorious RGB.
It's RBG.
Which just compelled me to buy this book. It's a collection of RGB's speeches and writings and some of her famous dissents. I can't wait to get further into this book. Hopefully that'll happen before the end of 2020. I don't know why I'm struggling so much to talk through this video. I hope it wouldn't be so obvious after I've edited out most of the garbage. That's all I have for you guys today. Let me know in the comments if you have other uplifting and empowering books to recommend. I'm sure people would love to see those, and I'll see you next time, hopefully next week. Bye!